It's happy hour. It is Friday, November 19th. This is happy hour number 59. 59 weeks in a row, man. We've been out here just having good conversations and chatting. 59 weeks I've been able to see these wonderful people hang out and chat. So thank you guys for continuing to come and hang out week after week. Man, keep this thing going for as long as we can. Hopefully, you guys got a chance to tune into the podcast that was released just today with Steve Cardinale. We talked about his book, I can't say the word. It's synaptic alchemy. I don't know why I was trying to say synaptic alchemy. Tripped up on that one, but yeah, it was a great episode. I loved his book. We had a great conversation. Hopefully you guys get a chance to tune into that. Got a number of wonderful episodes queued up for you in the coming weeks. Next week we're talking to Karush Alizada, talking about NLP and philosophy. After that we're talking to Christian Espinoza about the smartest person in the room, and then after that Dana McKinsey, co-author of the Book of Why. So it'll be a great conversation. So hopefully you guys get a chance to tune into that, and if you have not already, maybe you guys should do it after this happy hour session, or maybe even sometime this weekend. I did a live stream with Professor David Spiegelhalter from Cambridge University. Was introduced to him through Marcus Du Sautoy. So Professor Du Sautoy, thank you so much for introducing us. That was a great conversation. We talked a lot about probability theory and Bayesian thinking and Bayesian reasoning, and got a little bit philosophical with it, and I really enjoyed that conversation. I wish I could do like a 3-hour long podcast episode. That would be awesome. Just really explore an idea in depth. Shout out to everybody in the room. We got Eric Sims, Jennifer Nardin, Monica, Christian, Russell. Auntie is in the building as well. Thank you guys for coming and hanging out. Shout out to Christian, who just landed a awesome job. Christian, talk to us about this new role you got.
Yeah, appreciate it, Harpreet. Thanks. Yeah, so I was on my kind of long-term roadmap to get into product and data specifically, and came a lot sooner than I was prepared for. But Anaconda scooped me up. They're growing right now. So anybody in the product and data space, check them out. We were hiring for a lot of roles. We landed a pretty big funding round last year, or within the past year. And so they're scaling up, and they got a lot of new stuff on the horizon. So I'm specifically going to be working with the product and product marketing teams. So you might see some stuff. I probably already have seen some stuff from me on that, and it's a chance for me to kind of lean in even further to the data community and make sure I'm hearing the stuff that's important to y'all, and that our products in Anaconda are reflecting that. So it should be good times.
So talk to us about what that like role. First of all, I guess what was the interview process like for a product and data role, right? Like, because I feel like that's a blend of I mean, obviously multiple different skill sets. Was it heavy on data science? Was it heavy on product? Like, how do you think about product? I guess that should be the follow-up question after that.
So my role is a hybrid, and it's kind of interesting. Product marketing specifically, like you sit between obviously product management and like brand marketing. And in our case, since we're Anaconda, we're also you have a Venn diagram there that includes data scientists, right? Those are our customers, and those are also the people that are in the company. So my interview was definitely not technical. It was definitely more weighted towards, let's say, product management and business side. A lot of what product marketing is going to be doing is like segmentation, making sure that the things that we're building are matched up to the right people that want them. You've got the right stories in place internally and for your customers, right? So the interview focused on a lot of that stuff, making sure that, and really that was what I was doing for the smaller company that I was working before. So it was really just kind of telling my stories of things that we had done. And some of my favorite authors, Marty Kagan, Teresa Torres, the books that they've written have been super helpful for me. I could take things straight off of their pages and put them in practice. And doing that really helped me to level up some of the operations we were doing in our company, but also come away with stories that I could use in the interview. And so it didn't hurt that it was a terrific culture fit. I don't know if you can find a better fit or a better culture, I would say, than what's there at Anaconda. So it just, all the stars aligned, and for me specifically, but the role itself, I think in the interview process itself was pretty, there was like 5 rounds. So there's a lot of rounds, but I think that's because of the culture thing that I mentioned. You want to make sure it's still a relatively small company, and every person you bring in is a big piece of the culture, right? So you had to be prepared for a lot of talking with a lot of different people, but it was great overall.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, definitely sounds like a very, very interesting role. If you can, please do link those books that you had mentioned. I'd love to check those out. I mean, kind
Yeah,
of
I'll put them in the chat.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds very similar to the role that I do at Comet, where it's just kind of creating technical marketing type of materials and creating awesome projects and doing cool things with the platform. By the way, Comet, shout out to Comet, just was announced uh, yesterday, 50 million in funding, Series B funding from OpenView and a number of other um, partners involved with that. So huge shout out to Comet, you know, Gideon and Nimrod and uh, Nico and Drew and everybody behind the scenes doing all the amazing work that got them to that place. So I'm excited to be part of the team at this juncture and excited to see what's going to be happening with us in the future, man. I'm excited to continue to help that brand grow and do its thing. So huge congrats to Comet. So check it out. If you guys got questions on LinkedIn, if you got questions on YouTube or wherever it is that you are joining us from, please do let us know right there in the chats what your questions are. Super happy to take your questions on. Shout out to Rick. I haven't seen Rick in a very long time. Good to see you again, Rick. It's been quite some time. Good to have you here, Rick, from community member from Data Science Dream Job. So yeah, do any questions? Anybody want to kick us off with a question on any topic whatsoever? Please do let me know. Otherwise, I can try to come up with something.
I may have this may be a dumb question, but I was curious about it. So I have been, I hear about metaverse stuff as much as anyone else, right? And I see Russell's ears perk up when we start talking about that. So one of the things I was just kind of thinking about is I really like virtual reality and stuff already. And I was curious, trying to think forward into what kind of data would we track in the metaverse that we don't already track here, because probably because we can't track it or something, and to what benefit? Because I mean, I get it, like in an all electronic world you can track the number of like kilometers that your eyelids travel in a day from blinking if you want to, but like there's really like no use to that. So like what kind of like thoughts forward looking do you have thinking about what we would track and what kind of new thing it might open up as an opportunity, whether it's business or otherwise?
I think it would be everything that we cannot track in the real world would be tracked there, right? Because you imagine what the metaverse is supposed to be like. It's supposed to be this place that you can go to and live virtually. So if they're using a particular company's platform to access the metaverse, I'm sure they're going to track all the hangouts that you go to, all the people that you interact with, and things like that, just to try to tell you more cool things. But let's go to Russell and see what Russell has to say. Go for it.
Yeah, I've got some maybe off-kilter opinions on this. So whilst the metaverse is going to be big for user-centric interactivity, I think it's going to be very good for big installations and services underground for etc. So if we've got a let's call it a BIM model for want of a better definition. So we have a fully 3D modeled underground plan of services, say electrical cables, water supply, gas supply, everything that goes under the ground, and it's got a dating point to something that's above ground. Okay, that type of the metaverse will allow people to go through and survey what's beneath the ground without having to dig up the ground. So I'm sure this happens in the States and Canada as well as it does in the UK here. You have roadworks, disrupts traffic because someone has to dig up the road to do work. And that might be essential work. Obviously, there's no getting around that. But if it's just discovery work and you don't need to do it, that could save a lot of time. So that kind of angle of the metaverse, this connected data topography of services and everything that we can't see without having to dig up the ground, I think that could be very useful, save a lot of time and reduce the overall time that essential maintenance takes, should it be necessary.
Is that kind of the concept of a digital twin? Because I think what I'm imagining is, you go to the store and you buy a jetpack and you can fly around, right? Obviously not, bound by the laws of physics here, but what sounds like what you're talking about is having the digital version of a physical item as well, kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah, I think that does cross this entirely. I mean, a digital twin, to be very specific, would be more like, say, if a building was built in London here and it was built by an organization that had multiple bases across the globe, and say there was an office, a satellite office over in the States, and they wanted to be able to go in and have a walk around that facility that was being built. They could go into a room with VR, AR, and other interactive media, and literally walk around it at the same time as people are physically walking around it at the original location. So when digital twins are spoken about, at least in my opinion, that's the specific description of it. But your mention there of the underground stuff, I think it's exactly the same thing, but that's kind of less specific and more a big network of stuff that could be. So rather than being a digital twin, it's kind of a digital representation of it, because it's bigger than a single installation. I mean, I'm talking about something that would be spanning miles and miles of installation, crossing counties, countries even. So that type of thing. A very specific element of the metaverse, certainly not all it's good for. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people wanting to strap on a jetpack and seeing where they can fly. But I use it to the greatest of its advantages. That's where I think the best benefits are going to come from.
We have comments coming here from Christian. Says Eric's question has me curious. What types of behavioral analytics will be made possible by the metaverse interactions, which are not available currently? Yeah. We'll go to Coast up next, but Eric, I was gonna say, if you got Amazon Prime, check out the show called The Feed, and I think that is taking the idea of the metaverse to its like logical conclusion, and it's super fascinating what that envisions. But Costa, go for it.
So there's two sides to the whole digital twin side of things. I mean, you're absolutely right, Russell. There's the human social interaction side of it, where you're representing yourself digitally, but there's this entire side of digital twinning that the public, everyday human doesn't actually ever see. There's already significant investment going on in defense robotics specifically. So my previous job for the last 18 months, we were involved in a number of defense projects with the Australian Defence Force, looking at how can you make a realistic representation of what's going on before actually getting a robot in the air or on the ground or underwater, right? A lot of the time, these areas are impossible to really navigate, right? So there's a big investment, not just from the Australian Defence Force, but across the military complex from across the world, looking at this whole digital twin strategy, right? So there's that's kind of a split off side of it, right? The metaverse kind of digital twin verse, I think, will be more commercial centric. So you're kind of seeing this as like a second ripple of that whole idea of digital twins, right? I feel like it might be a little bit more commercially focused than necessarily like some of the complications that you would run into when you're looking at underground mining, etc., that you're trying to explore areas that you can't really get a good look into, right? As much as ground penetrating sonar is going to give you, X amount of visibility underneath to recreate what would happen, it takes many iterations of being able to approximate what that looks like. So one of the things we were doing was approximating seafloor without having seen it at a high resolution before, right? How do you approximate a high resolution seafloor with only a low resolution map? And what I mean is, how do you go from 3 meters to 3 centimeters, right? Recreating sonar images at that level. And the problem that you will very quickly run into in a simulation space from there is very much this, this idea that simulations are always perfect, right? They're always going to be solvable by the robot that you've got in there. And you're never actually going to hit that true real world test case, right? So from a commercial standpoint, I think there are still a number of significant real world barriers there. But I think the metaverse / individual human digital twinning, where you're able to track interactions, where you're able to track, behavioral patterns, I think that's going to be a lot more accessible because there's going to be real world data, and there's going to be so many more people contributing to that data. For example, for 100 people to contribute their social interactions, we've been doing that for 10 years, right? Whereas to get a 3 meter resolution map of an underwater section of something, it'll cost you, $250,000 to run an expedition to run a scanner along the ground, right? So there is this fundamental blocker within that, the robotics or the commercial side of exploration and field robotics side of it. But I guess that's also something that will get solved over time. It's just a question of how much investment goes into it and how long that takes.
I'm curious, in the metaverse, are people like operating under pseudonyms? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is it kind of like Reddit where everybody can be a dickhead because they're hiding behind a screen name? How does this work?
I mean,
Anyone?
I can't imagine that anonymity has always been the the go-to location for online bullying and for all sorts of harassment and issues, right? So anonymity will continue to be that shield, irrespective of whether it's on social media or whether it's on like a metaverse or anything else, right?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
I would definitely agree with that. I was just talking to my wife about that a couple of days ago because, I get, very like pie in the sky, super cool. I want my jetpack for, like an immersive metaverse rather than a very businessy oriented metaverse that, is about, cables and wires and things like that, which obviously it all has its place. But like the thing that I have no idea how we're going to fix, and I highly doubt that we're going to do a very good job in the first few tries of it, is fixing the harassment of a metaverse. Because I have VR and people are jerks in VR, right? And it's like, what you've done is, in the real world, if you get in my face and you irritate me enough, because we are like hierarchical mammals and we defend our territory, if you make me mad enough, I'll just punch you in the nose, right? And sure, there are laws and things like that, but I have a mechanism to show you that I'm not going to take your crap for 1 second longer if I feel so inclined to do so. But in the metaverse or in any electronic world, now suddenly you've given all the tools to those who would abuse them and removed the tools from those who need them to defend themselves. And so it's like we don't have a solution for that in a flat screen world, let alone in a metaverse world, whatever that looks like, right? And so I worry about that, even just like for the psychological and sociological well-being of citizens of the metaverse or whatever, metaversians. So that's, I think, definitely an important aspect of it. And because I think most people are interested in your average Joe is interested in flying around the metaverse and less so in, the more like, I guess, important and impactful things that, Russell and Costa were talking about. So it's definitely interesting that you bring that up, Costa.
I mean, but that's the thing, right, Eric? Like, we haven't solved that. It's not the first time we've seen the harassment thing take online platforms, whether it's social media, whether it's on, we've seen it on Bebo, Facebook, MySpace, Weemies. We've seen it in, you jump on a game of Call of Duty online, you jump on FIFA online, right? It's known for this kind of thing, right? And it's definitely something that we haven't solved. We're just shifting the problem to a slightly different digital interaction space, right? So I'd almost argue that I'd be inherently more interested in the commercial applications of a digital twin world, in an immersive digital twin world, than in, say, the social ones, because there just might be more net positive out of that in some ways.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'd agree with both of you, although I think that the background or the what's the word I'm looking for, the foundation upon which the metaverse will be built hopefully should mean that everybody that enters it and has a presence in it has to go through some official registration. So even if it is a non-authentic representation of their human form, i.e. by name or look or whatever it is, it can be traced back to them. But what's probably more interesting for most of the people on the call here is if the metaverse is being built and operated within an environment that is associated with AI, can the model be there and kind of have an open ear to listen to all of the chatter and pick up keywords that are representative of harassment, bullying, and put a mark against the person. Maybe not just for the one word, but if there's consistent stuff on them, highlight them for review. It goes to a panel for review, and if they are validated as behaving poorly, they're rejected or they're warned, or it goes through some kind of mechanism. So I think that would be a really interesting view for that. And secondly, also, I've seen a couple of Rick's comments here. He said it could be interesting for buskers working remotely, which sounds amazing. But then that also makes me think of there could be an interaction here in the metaverse for NFTs and blockchain. You know, say a busker wants to play an instrument, wants to play a limited instrument. So say, a classic Les Paul custom or something like that. Les Paul might issue it as an NFT, and this busker can be seen playing it in the metaverse. Things of that nature. You know, there's huge scope for individualization and therefore commercialization in the metaverse. And if it's done properly, I think it's all going to need to use NFTs.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be interesting to think about. Like, apparently Ed Sheeran used to be singing on the corner with his guitar, and before he got famous, right? So imagine somebody who gets a famous busking on the metaverse, right? That could be an NFT. That moment when he was just on, or she was just on the corner of a street in the metaverse doing their thing before they got famous.
So is this the genuine first use of a blockchain or NFT technology for verification? Like, I mean, because as much as we've used verification in the past and controls like that, like look at dating apps, for example, right? Being able to verify and trace me back to who I am on a dating app doesn't stop me inherently from engaging in harassment, right? We've heard that time and time again. And though it's been reported, people have been kicked off it, they've found their way back on that. Like stalkerish behavior still continues on dating apps today, right? And it's like, I don't know whether just being able to trace it back to that person is inherently enough of a deterrent to that kind of thing, right? So there might be significant other changes that would have to happen, which, like you're saying, like if you're talking about a bot reading into it, then reading into every chat or listening into every interaction, then you're talking about I mean, I don't know about most countries, but you're talking about, at least in the USA, you'd see a lot of pushback on freedom of speech, and you'd see all those things, right? So we end up opening up the same kind of worms that we have in the real world, just in a slightly different world, right? So like the busker example is fantastic. Now it's basically what we've seen the maturity of YouTube influencers do now. For a long time, YouTube was this free world to just upload whatever you want. But then in the last few years, we've seen influencers really come along and start to take the individualization of YouTube and package that and actually monetize that and turn that into, exactly like you're saying, that business opportunity that exists from the individualization of it. That kind of thing you can definitely still see within a metaverse, and that would be easy to monitor. It would be easy to monetize, and it's potentially still very positive for the world, right?
There's a publication on Medium called Building the Metaverse. John Randolph, or Radoff rather, is a top contributor there, and he posted something called The Evolution of the Creator Economy. So I posted a link to that there, short 6-minute read, but he just talks about these 3 different types of eras: pioneer era, engineering era, creator era. I'm interested to see where this goes up. Just kind of a newbie question here. How do you access the metaverse, right? Is it only going to be like, is it going to be like the internet where I just, have different pathways to get onto the internet? Is there one metaverse? Is it only Facebook's metaverse? Like, how does this shit work?
Yeah, that's also another interesting question. Sorry, you go ahead, Eric. I'll catch up.
I was just gonna take one stab at a thing I've read. And so in order to be a metaverse, it has to be cross-platform. So Facebook can't have a metaverse, right? Facebook can have a planet or a galaxy, right, inside a larger metaverse. And in order to have a true metaverse, I need to be able to leave the Facebook metaverse and go to the Artists of Data Science metaverse seamlessly. I have to be able to take my identity, my avatar, my name, my money, everything with me, just like as if I was going to get on an airplane, take my passport and go to a different country or something like that. My identity would follow me, right? And so that, I think that to me sounds like I'm actually super like pro that, because I like the idea of having like I like having a unified identity. I like being me. And I don't necessarily want to try and manage like being one character here and some other character here and being a semi-normal like person like character here and all of that. And that's actually kind of what you see in like Ready Player One, right? Which has shaped a lot of what we see today in virtual reality. But I think that's a key hallmark of the metaverse, is has to be seamless transition between platforms.
The artist, science metaverse. I like the sound of that.
I'd agree with that as well. And kind of tying together what you were saying there, Eric, and what Gustav was saying earlier, I'm seeing an evolution of NFTs here where we kind of reverse the NFT. And when, every individual is born on the planet and they get an identity, rather than just being given a passport or an identity card, they are given a unique NFT that will stay with them for the rest of their life. And then everything they purchase electronically has its own NFT that's tied back to their own, and it only transfers away from that if they trade it away somewhere else. And by that kind of forward and back NFT universe, if there was poor behavior, you could always trace back what it was through to the current owning NFT, which equates to a single individual somewhere in the physical world. Speaking to you guys all together now, that's just kind of clicked to me. Then I think that's the best way that the whole systemology of this metaverse is going to work. Every single person has their own unique NFT, and then every item has an NFT, and you join them together within the metaverse.
What if you could, just kind of riffing off that, Russell, what if you could expand that to its real world uses? Okay, so today, what's the biggest issue with international travel? It's ensuring that the people who are traveling are vaccinated, right? So each country has come up with this QR code, and they've got their own PDFs, they've got their own ways of verifying, their own ways of communicating that. And countries are basically settled on this QR code that interacts with databases. But then each country has to set up that network. But when you have an NFT system like that, you can actually verify all of those things potentially in a much more connected manner, right? It seems like just the next kind of step evolution to that. And you can do a lot of things. I mean, tying back to this metaverse, right? What if you could map the social interactions, and like, we don't have a fine-grained real-world physical social interaction map just yet, right? What if you could actually map and simulate that for spread of something like COVID-19, right? That's the kind of thing that really intrigues me in this whole thing. And I think, to a point, what Rick mentioned in the comments is in the chat, is NVIDIA's Omniverse. What they're looking at is how can you get many different connected creators and be able to create virtual reality areas, whether that's for gaming, whether that's for robotics. The proposal I've seen in robotics is how me and teams from around the world can come together and build this simulated reality for a robot, and we can test it in its hundreds.
Say hi.
Got Greg and Greg's son here. Hi. What's your name, kid?
Noah.
Noah. Nice to meet you.
It's
nice
too cute.
to meet you.
How are you?
Yeah. Up good. Thank you. Good.
Nice manners.
My baby's hanging out with us too. He's just sleeping right now. He's hanging out. He's sleeping.
All right.
Greg,
Sorry, guys. Sorry for the disruption.
No, all good, man. Good to see you. Are you still in San Francisco?
No. I'm back home. So
nice.
Staying with the little one today.
Awesome, man. That's awesome.
All right. Sorry.
Right on, man. Yeah, no, all good, man. Feel free to hop in on any questions or any topics, or let us know if you got any questions or anywhere you want to take the topic, man. Let us know. Right now, we're just talking about NFTs, the metaverse. I've got all sorts of like questions going on about this metaverse thing, man. Like, I, if I mean, okay, let's think about the YouTube algorithm has a hate speech detection algorithm, right? So there's like some type of policing that happens when you're being, a dickhead on YouTube. If these type of things exist in the metaverse, right? You have these cyber police type of entities. What would that look like, man? Like, how would we? Yeah, I'm just curious. Any thoughts on that? Anybody have any ideas on that? I'm just curious where that goes.
I think we can say fairly confidently, Harpreet, that what it should look like is not Demolition Man. Does anybody remember that movie from the 90s? But this, but this utopian thing, where people are speaking and they say a curse word and they get given a citation of like 1 credit every time they say something, and everybody's just being monitored everywhere. So I mean that was like early 90s if I remember. So it was quite an immature assessment of the future at that stage. But it's good material for us of what not to do, I think.
Christian, I saw you're unmuted there if you want to jump in. Oh. Go for it, Kostab, or Christian, if you want to jump in there, go for it.
I got distracted, sorry, so my question's out of my mind now.
Okay, no worries. Kostab, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, like that kind of meta policing in a sense, that would be very, very strange. There's this weird philosophy, right, about humanity. We don't do things because it's right. We do things because the fabric of the social contract that we have is mutually beneficial, right? There's this entire theory in psychology that a lot of the things that we do because they're morally correct is only because we're in the visibility of the rest of the world. Right. Take, for example, Australia's facing that a little bit right now in the public eye is the cricket captain. So I know cricket's probably not the biggest topic out in the States, but it's a sport. It's kind of like baseball. And basically the captain of the Australian team, he's stepped down yesterday because of a lewd messaging scandal, right? From like 3 or 4 years ago. Now, had that not surfaced publicly, he's been the captain for the last 3 years. Right. It's only now that it's in the public eye he's standing up to, this is what the Australian captain should live up to this standard. Right. So there is, and I'm not picking on him, like, all things considered with recent Australian captains, he's been one of the, one of the better ones from a moral standpoint. But like all things said and done, there is some element of truth to that philosophy. So if we're in a world where, like Demolition Man, where everything is watched, everything is controlled, would we actually be humans anymore at a philosophical level?
I mean, that's a deep question, man.
And beyond that,
human in a metaverse.
And beyond that, if we were forced to do the right thing all the time, and we weren't given the choice to do the wrong thing, how do we know the difference between good, if we're actually inherently good, or we're just forced to be good? It's what makes us good is having the right to be bad and choosing not to.
Well, I mean, what if good or bad doesn't exist, right? It's all becomes subjective. So, like you mentioned, it's all about the rules or the frameworks or axioms that we're operating under.
Right. And what's right today? Like I think what's his name, Jimmy Carr, the British comedian. There's something he said that was quite profound. The joke that cancels him has already been said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So there's this interesting twist to what is morality, and all of that blurs away if there's this forced sense of morality.
Anybody want to jump in on this or provide some insight, because it's going to be an interesting direction.
I think that is quite interesting, and I think people that have malicious or malevolent intent can try to engineer that to their benefit or to achieve their ends. So say if someone had an agenda against the Aussie cricket captain there, they've been rifling through his history for maybe 6 months to find something that they can then surface publicly that would have the achieved result. And, nobody's going to be perfect. Everybody, including probably everyone on this call now, will have done something in their past that they regret now, with the view of a current assessment of morals and ethics. And sometimes that's simply because the world has changed and everybody's matured. Sometimes it's because you've actually grown into a different person, and it probably wasn't great at the time and you now regret doing it. Either way, if you're a much better person now and you've moved beyond that, I kind of don't think you should be punished for it now. You should be judged on the person you are now rather than something you did. Certainly if you're talking about 3, 4, 5 years ago, unless it's, an absolutely horrendous crime. I mean, say it's murder or something like that, perhaps that's a different kettle of fish. But if it's, tweeting something that's a little bit offensive and someone puts that in the papers and say, oh, look, this wasn't quite good, or, a blackface has been something that's been big press for some high profile people. The time is different, and I don't mean to support it or condone it, but assess it objectively rather than subjectively. And I think it's very difficult to do those things subjectively because they're so emotive, especially if it's something that's to do with race or gender or any discrimination whatsoever. If it can be viewed through the magnifying glass of some discrimination in the modern age, it's very unlikely to be accepted that you wouldn't do exactly the same thing now because it's such an emotive subject.
I mean, what's that age-old saying? I can't remember who the author of this is. I used to know, but the past is a different country. They do things differently there. And I think that speaks volumes to a lot of these topics that we're talking about right now. And I mean, Eric is spot on. Statute of limitations exists within the realm of the legal system that we have in the real world. But when we talk about a digital public world, all of that melts away in the high court of public vision, right? There's a lot of accounts of this, and I'm not saying that any of those accounts were wrong or rightly so. It's not making a judgment call of that. I'm just saying that the rules change entirely. That idea of having the ability to change as a person, if you're tracked through everything you want to do, if you're given an NFT the day you're born, Russell, doesn't that kind of go against the ability to change as a person as well then?
I mean, it's not like your personalities, your traits, your thoughts and all that is etched into an NFT. I think that's not possible, right? It would be more, I don't know, man. But
you still could be traced back to it and judged for it, right?
Yeah.
I'd say I don't think it'll stop you being able to change and mature, but it'll provide a ledger of your journey of maturation. So if anyone comes to you and says, oh, well, you said this kind of thing, 5 years ago, that's very misogynistic, so you probably don't have a great view of women. You could go back to your NFT ledger and say, yeah, I can't deny having said that, but look at what I've done since that's been completely antipathic to that, and, I'm a different person to what I was there, and this is how I can prove it, rather than just hyperbole,
They used to tell you back in the days. Yeah, definitely go for it.
What I was going to say, the idea of Web 3.0 is to have a decentralized everything, right? So kind of like power to the people, literally. And if you have limitations in this physical world, my concerns are that some of those limitations may disappear because the many voted so. So government entities will have a hard time intervening in this sense to dictate what needs to happen on the cyberspace. Making sure to control abusive behaviors, et cetera, or enforce certain tax requirements, et cetera. So in Web 3.0, we'll continue to fight that. You'll see that people will have the capability of getting different personality, different behaviors and things like that. So it's something that I think most people don't know how things will play out, and that's probably why I think government or big governments are kind of cringing today to figure out what's going to happen. I mean, look at what just happened yesterday. There's this group called Constitutional DAO. I don't know if you guys heard that. So they tried to take a bet to purchase one of the 13 copies of the USA's Constitution. They won, but they were able to get 20,700 people together each of them put, actually I got the number. I mark it on my notebook here. So
on average, $200,
$206 exactly.
Oh, what happened to Greg? Greg has disappeared into the metaverse. We'll wait for him to get back. Yeah, it's really interesting topic. I think I would definitely spend more time researching Web 3.0 and the metaverse just to get more intelligent about it. I don't know, what's your guys' levels of understanding in general, the rest of the group here, when it comes to this stuff? Is it just something you've heard about in passing? Are you actively studying it? Just out of curiosity, let me know. Give me a thumbs up if this is something that you're actively interested in, actively researching and studying. Yeah, awesome. Greg is
Sorry,
back.
guys. My laptop died. Sorry, that's what I get for working upstairs. Yeah. So yeah. To your point, they raised like $41 million, and the other bidder that was, I guess counter bidding, eventually won. But what they wanted to do is use Ether to purchase that constitutional paperwork and rent it to a museum like the Smithsonian's or something like that. And maybe the Smithsonian would pay that DAO group some fees, and maybe whoever has NFTs under this DAO would be remunerated of some sort and things like that. But it's kind of like the idea behind the people getting back their power, their freedom, and things like that. And that's what I think 3.0 is trying to achieve with all these things. So it's an interesting space to live or to be. When you think about how such a small group of people was able to come up with $41 million, think about other things that could be done in terms of how fast they can raise money for other causes. So I'm quite interested to see, how these things happen over the next couple of years, where the boundaries will be eliminated, right? So you could just spend a couple bucks or fractions of a dollar to a country that doesn't necessarily have the infrastructures or physical infrastructures, and allow them to create, do sales with each other, with low transaction fees. And that's what we're trying to do. A lot of countries, for example, Venezuela, or what is the other one? Something in Latin America, rely on Bitcoin to create transactions and earn livings at very low transaction fee with the Lightning feature that they have. So it's crazy what's happening, and I'm just curious to see more.
Yeah, I mean, could the metaverse and could blockchain be the answer to immortality? Let's say your thoughts are a blockchain ledger, your consciousness is a blockchain ledger. Can you upload that into this metaverse and live forever? I mean, it's possible, right? I mean, it's if you take it to that conclusion. I'm just curious what people think about that.
Well, by that token, I guess Marcus Aurelius and those folks have already achieved that, right there.
Yeah.
His very journal still lives today, and his thoughts impact our lives, but him as a person is no longer around to witness that. So maybe it's some sort of extension of that.
Yeah. Eric talking about when I'm a brain in a jar, I'm just going to hang out in the metaverse all the time. Yeah, same here. But yeah, definitely something I'm going to spend more time researching and thinking about. It's in other news, GPT-3 is open for all without a wait list. I'm excited about that. I've never got a chance to play with it. I've been on the wait list for forever. So now I'm glad I don't have to play around with that anymore. Greg, thanks for hanging out, man. Have any of you guys got a chance to play with GPT-3 or do anything with it whatsoever? I'm probably going to try to see if there's an integration with Comet that we can work with and create content around that. But I'm just curious if anybody has had a chance to play with it.
Yeah, I've done a little bit with it. There's some hacks I'm involved with using the engine to try and generate human equivalent syntax and text bodies to summarize long form written content and send it out automatically as, say, weekly updates. Just bytes. It was interesting. I've been meaning to post about it for a while actually, because the whole system is very impressive, but has its gaps as well. It's kind of like an early school pupil. It's really excelling in some areas, but there's a lot of gaps there. And if you know which areas to look at for the gaps, you can really make those gaps very noticeable. But it's an impressive thing. It's just not a completely it's just not a complete entity at the moment. It needs a bit more work. Needs to be spread out. But at some point, yeah, I'll probably post a bit about it. Some of the things that I did, just asked it some very simple questions for things that don't make logical sense to something that thinks completely logically. You would need to, I mean, a child probably could answer this question, but you need to think kind of laterally and a little bit creatively to answer it. And the GPT-3 system doesn't have the capability to do that as well as a human at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, except you can have GPT-3 spit out a bunch of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be a human who has to sift through that and pick out the comprehensible bits of that. Posted a link right here in the chat, another Medium publication called Data Driven Fiction, and people are like publishing like fiction from GPT-3. So it's worth checking out. So shout out to Eric Riddock is in the building. Never seen you here before, so welcome, Eric. If you got a question, let me know. How's it going? Yeah, questions, comments, let me know, guys. We've been deep into the metaverse today. Looks like I gotta do my homework on the metaverse so I can get more smart about this, because it's coming, my friends. Any questions or comments coming in from LinkedIn or YouTube, let me know. At the moment, there are none. How about the room here? Any questions, any comments? Anyone want to take this conversation in a particular direction?
I was gonna do the GPT-3 thing, Harpreet, but you did it before I could. So
yeah,
our wells run dry. That's all I got.
Yeah, I'll be excited to play around with it, man. I know it's a huge model, and probably take forever to download it and get started with. But I'm excited, man. Eric, go for it.
This is like a totally like basic question, not metaversey at all. So I'm trying to understand like the difference practically. I tried to quickly Google it and didn't really get much. I'm trying to understand the difference practically between like SQL Server and Redshift. Now this is like what I'm doing on a daily basis, because I'm doing stuff in SQL Server, but then we have certain things that are stored in Redshift, and I was querying, and lo and behold, I stumbled across the list aggregation function, and it like made my life so much easier because I could take rows partitioned over an ID and put them in a nice like list so that I could show the path that a customer had traveled or whatever. It was awesome. But there's not exactly a list ag function. There is a string ag function in SQL Server. But anyway, I'm just trying to understand like why I just don't understand why so many different SQL metaverses even exist. And then like why does Redshift matter? And why does SQL Server matter? It's like a basic question, but I don't get it.
Yeah, these different SQL engines, that's kind of what they're called. They have their own underlying, I mean, it's all SQL, but they have their own flavors and different types of syntax. I see Marina is unmuted. So Marina, if you want to jump in here, definitely let us know. But that's like that. It's like the different SQL engines, they all kind of have their own spin and take on SQL. As far as I know, Redshift is just like a cloud SQL database, right?
AWS version.
AWS, yeah. Marina, any questions or comments?
Yeah, no, I had a question. I don't have an answer for Eric. So, sorry. Yeah.
Let's see if anybody has an answer for Eric's question. That's my understanding of it, Eric, because I know there's subtle differences between what I do in Postgres and what I do in MySQL, and it's just because the different SQL engines, I guess. That's what I've found on a Google search, and I've just ran with that.
If I can, I feel like, I mean, it's kind of advantageous if you're a cloud provider, because I mean, from like a vendor lock-in perspective, like all the SQL scripts you ever write, they're only going to work with like Athena data warehouse, or like, I don't know. Actually, Athena is the only thing I really know of that uses Redshift. Like, is there something else you run Redshift queries against?
No, that's where I'm running it. So I guess that makes sense. Like try and lock them into your, like Sony having their own version of an SD card for forever or whatever, which is actually just really annoying. But it makes sense.
One thing too is that since it's like corporately sponsored, I mean, they can like, people have a reason, because like with open source projects like Postgres, well, I guess Postgres has sponsors too, but if a project's being sponsored, you can sort of like manipulate it towards the aims of like, whatever the goals of the sponsor organization has. So AWS, like, one nice thing about them sponsoring it is they have all those sweet not plugins, but they have like sweet features. Like, I mean, depending on the version of like Postgres or MySQL you're using, like there might not be window functions, or like if you're running window functions, they might be slow. But like with Redshift, like I think from my understanding, everything I've ever used has been like fairly optimized, and it's been there. Like I don't think there's ever been a SQL function I've wanted to use that Redshift didn't have. So, which is another way, honestly, you can get locked in, because then you're just like, this is so convenient. I have this thing, and now I can't leave.
That makes sense. Yeah, that totally makes sense. I hadn't thought about that. Okay, so it's a business thing, and I just need to deal with it, or start my own. That it's just going to rule them all.
Yes.
If we make a language called Eric Query Language, for it.
SQL, that's great. Yeah.
It's maybe interesting to turn that on its head and think, if the metaverse comes off the ground and works, is that going to harken the age of a single coding language, a universal coding language, where we won't have SQL and Python and R and Ruby and all of these different ones? Will we consolidate to a single universal language to make the metaverse more responsive?
It'll probably be English, because that is the lingua franca of the internet. So natural extension is, yeah. Marina, go for it.
No. It's if anybody had experience with graph knowledge, right? So like kind of like graph databases from relational databases, like, and what is a good way to start if one wants to start? Like I know like the Neo4j seems to be used by many people. I just don't know. I just was lazy, and I thought I can ask here and avoid doing a little bit of research. If anybody has any thoughts.
Yeah, Neo4j is the only one that I know of. Anybody else got any insights onto this? Let me know. Somebody who I think might be a good resource to follow on LinkedIn if you're not already following him, David Knickerbocker. I'll link to his profile here. I think he's actually writing a book on graph. He does like NLP and like networks and stuff like that. Eric, you're kind of into that network stuff, aren't you?
Yeah, just I haven't done like graph database stuff, but I know, yeah, like you said, David Knickerbocker, if you just look through his like hashtag 100 days of networks posts, he has a few posts in there that have like a stack of books for, and I'm sure you've looked at a bunch of it. But are you like most interested in graph data, like databases, or just like working with graphs and networks in general?
Like in general, well, I don't know yet, right? So, but I like the idea that also you can you can work on the links too, right? So it's not like the databases by itself, but then I found the beauty is going to be like in the links, right? So if you can not just only the nodes, right? And then you can be many kinds of products. If I understand, like the links, I think it's very, I think it's very powerful in that sense.
Definitely. You could check out Tiger Graph. Tiger Graph is pretty interesting. They have some, so they're like a platform, but they have some helpful tutorial videos kind of explaining, first off, like how to use their platform. But they also they just have helpful, like you can get a free version where they have some projects that they'll walk you through and show you how different edge relationships would exist, like you were talking about. So I've liked learning from them a bit. And then the other is I just dropped a link in the chat to the Stanford, it's called SNAP. I don't know what SNAP stands for, but it's from Stanford University. And actually, I think the one I just sent you is just the road network in California. But anyway, you can click up like to a page above it, and they have big network examples because it's really easy, not really easy, but you can usually find toy networks that have 30 or 40 nodes, but you can't, it's difficult to find something that has a whole bunch of nodes to have fun with. Like the California Road Network is one that I worked with a little bit. That one's fun. That one's good. And then there are several other ones, and they're different types of networks in case you want something that has different kinds of relationships. If you want to look at like internet traffic or road traffic or products, different things like that. So that's a sweet resource I really like.
Cool. Thank you. And if you say it's easy, then must be easy.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
I've actually been thinking,
Eric R. Yeah, go for it.
oh yeah, sorry. I've been thinking a ton about graph databases recently. And so the reason why is because I've been writing a GraphQL API, and I was like, graph is in the API name, it's in the database name, like they must go together. And so when I was looking into this, like I came to find out that almost nobody uses a graph database for GraphQL. And that's kind of a tangent, but one thing I learned when I was investigating, because I was looking at Neo4j, I was looking at like Janus, which is another open source graph database. I was looking like, and TigerGraph looked really cool. Like TigerGraph seems like it's really performant. It just seems like the cloud solutions like they're really expensive. So yeah, what I learned is that like, so graph databases, they fall into like a camp of just like NoSQL databases. I mean, we just, divide all the databases between SQL and NoSQL. And like, because like I'm an MLOps engineer. And so we're always thinking about like performance and stuff. And so like one of the, when you go to the NoSQL question, like it's always some sort of trade-off, because like relational databases are just like awesome. Like there's basically no data you can't model somehow with a relational database. And so even like GraphQL APIs, like basically everyone who does a GraphQL API, even though they allow you to query data as though it's a graph, they use a relational database to power it. Because like if you think about it, what a graph database gives you is it lets you store metadata about the relationships of two things. Like if I'm like a customer, and then if there's like a customer's entity and there's like a store entity, my relationship could be like maybe the trips I've taken to the store or something like that. And so, there's all kinds of data you might want to store about the trips there's all kinds of data you might want to store about the trips I've taken to the store. And so the way people achieve that with like a SQL database is they just make a table in between. So you got like your person table, which is like where Eric would go, and you got like your stores. And then you have like an association table, which that's like what it's called. Like you just put all the data there. And so and I was like, but Neo4j sounds so much cooler, because like my queries would run fast, and like I would be able to like model the data as flexibly as I want. And so I just like, this is just like, the limited human experience that I have. But Neo4j, like one issue that it apparently has is it doesn't really scale beyond the amount of data you can store on like a single computer's hard drive. Like it struggles to like, like it doesn't really scale horizontally. I don't know if that made sense to you at all, but like it made my understanding it's not really built for that. And like it's also written in Java, so it has the JVM, which is like a big problem for like RAM usage and stuff, if you care about that. So yeah, like if you do want to model data graphically, joins actually aren't the worst thing in the world. I mean, SQL databases, they were written to handle large joins, but there's also another cool thing called select and load that you could look at, where you don't actually do a join. You select a subset from one table, and then you run another select statement on the next table to like get what you want. Like that's probably going too much into the weeds, but I know graph databases are really cool. But the thing is, if graph databases were amazing, like who wouldn't want a graph database? Like all data is basically a graph. And so I feel like the reason why they're not as mainstream as like, I would think they would be, is because they kind of have these like performance trade-offs, like everything does.
Thank you very much, Eric R. I appreciate that. That was a very in-depth answer. Learned a lot for that for sure. Anybody else have questions, please do let me know. Eric, Kate Besonova on LinkedIn is asking for the tutorials that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago that you had linked. I'm not sure which one that was in particular, but if you do recall, please go ahead and post that link again, and I will be sure to share that on LinkedIn with Kate. Any other questions on anything whatsoever, please do let me know. If not, we can begin to wrap it up. Great conversations, learned a lot about the metaverse, and actually give me more motivation to go ahead and study that. Hopefully you guys get a chance to tune in to the podcast. Remember, I got the episode with Steve Cardinale. His book was really cool, really enjoyed it. So enjoyed talking to him about that. Number of episodes going live that are going to be early part of December. Going live with Nick Singh, author of AC Data Science Interview. Going live with both the gentlemen from One Salting. So I'm sure you've heard of them. There's Javier, and I think Javier's the guy's last name. Oh my God. I'm gonna have to edit that part of the podcast. But both the guys from One Salting will be on the show. Looking forward to that. And speaking to Grant Fleming about his book, Responsible Data Science. That's going to be a great conversation talking about how to do data science in ethical and responsible manner. So I'm excited for that. Guys, thanks so much for joining in. Hopefully we'll be back next week. Next week is next week Thanksgiving?
Yep,
it is,
next
right?
Friday is the day after. That's right.
So I should probably cancel that because I don't think anybody's going to show up. Last year was different because nobody can go Black Friday shopping. So everybody's hanging out. But I guess next week I might cancel that. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But you know what happens from next week on? I'm going to start rocking those Christmas sweaters for sure. So that's going to be fun. Thanks, guys, for hanging out. Thanks for chilling and talking and expanding my mind on a number of things. Remember, my friends, you've got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everyone.